Here.
Here. Here.
Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The first item on our agenda is usually executive session. We're going to move that to after our public communications. So we'll move on to item 4, public communications, and start with item A, which is our COVID-19 update, which is normally from our Chesprocott Health Director, Maura Esposito. Unfortunately, I think this is the first time Maura is not available for the meeting, and we certainly understand that. She's been working hard, probably working very hard with the new variant that's out there, and she's done a wonderful job of keeping us up to speed. But in the interim, I think, Sean, are you going to give us a brief update?
Sure, I will. And I have, we'll kind of cover it again in my town manager report, but if it's okay with you, I'll just do that section right now because the first point, a couple of pages are related to COVID. So thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as folks are aware, over the last couple of weeks, we have seen an increase in number of cases here in Cheshire and, of course, across the state and really across the country, driven largely by the Delta variant of the disease. Cheshire's local positivity rate over the last 7 DPH reporting days has increased to 3.4%. This represents, for perspective, 49 positives out of 7 days, out of a total of 1,453 tests. I think when you have, I think Arnett may still be bringing up the town manager reports to distribute, but you'll see the graph on here and we can go over that in more detail when we get to that. To date, 72.72% of all Cheshire residents have received at least one vaccination dose, according to DPH. Chesprocott continues to hold drive-through vaccination clinics open to all ages, but particularly targeting students before school resumes later this month. Just last week, I was on hand at CHS as Chesprocott vaccinated a number of folks, including 37 eligible school students just last week at the Thursday's event. And our most recent, I think, as information I did share with the council are the the weekly updates that come from the state with respect to average daily rates of COVID cases per 100,000. Everyone will remember the yellow, orange, and red maps that we've seen. Cheshire did move up to the orange category last week, which is at 11.1 cases per 100,000 population. This is one of the metrics, along with local positivity rates, that we had established in consultation with Maura and through discussions as we tried to determine whether or not to implement a mask requirement here for town hall and other municipal facilities only, municipal buildings. So we did put that in place effective yesterday. We're going to continue to monitor the metrics and see and hope that we are able to kind of turn the corner on this and dip back down. We thought it was important not to just follow the herd of towns that were implementing these really the prior 2 weeks, but really make sure we're monitoring our own data and our own metrics and doing what's best in our opinion for the safety of the community. So just to reiterate, the masking policy for the town of Cheshire, in summary, currently there's no mask requirement outdoors for any of our municipal employees or using our outdoor facilities. Indoors, mask and face coverings are required in all town buildings and facilities and shared vehicles. Vaccinated employees may remove their masks when working in personal workspaces if 6 feet of distance can be maintained. And public visitors to public buildings are asked to wear mask face coverings in all town buildings and facilities, as are patrons using our public transportation, such as the senior center minibuses. So that probably summarizes where we are with respect to the developments over the last week, and we continue to try to put out as much information and monitor all the local metrics as best we can to affect how we will continue to proceed over the coming weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Questions or comments from members of the council? Hey, Mr. Slocum.
Well, I'm Tim from booth 4, which precludes masking, apparently. So I just thought I'd clarify that.
Yeah, it is our understanding that Sean did implement a mask in all municipal buildings as a requirement based on the data. Certainly, Sean and I spoke about that. I know he alerted the entire council of his plan to do so. I support it. I know there's differences of opinion on this matter, but in an effort to try to protect, those more vulnerable or those that may be unvaccinated, I think it's an effort to try to just keep winning the war against this very difficult pandemic. So I know it's not popular with everybody, but we're all in this together. We're trying to get through this together, and hopefully people understand if it is a bit of a discomfort or something they're not really happy doing, it's really for the greater good. I know there is a differencing of opinion on that, but nonetheless, I certainly support Sean's effort in this at the moment. And if and when we can make modifications based on the data that we see, I'm sure Sean will recommend doing so, and we'll move forward with easing up the policy. But thank you, Sean. I know you've been taking this very seriously. This has been a very difficult process to manage, as most of you can understand. It's a moving target. Whatever expert you talk to, there seems to be differences of opinion. And for those of us that are lay people, like Sean and us as a town council, who don't have expertise in these matters, it's very difficult to understand what is in the best interest of the community. So we're trying to be collaborative when we make these decisions. We're not trying to single any group out. We're just trying to make decisions that we believe are in the best interest of the majority of the community. And I can tell you this, Sean and Arnett and our staff are doing a wonderful job in doing that. So they have my complete support. And Sean, thank you for taking the time that you're taking to make these very delicate and difficult decisions. You're doing a good job. So with that, if there's no other questions of members of the council, we're going to move on to what I think is a very difficult matter here. It's recognition of, and I hate to even say it, retired Economic Development Coordinator Jerry Sitko. And before I get into my comments, and I'm sure the council has a lot of things to say, the only thing I would say is, Jerry, what's difficult for me is to have to read retired, because I was hoping this day didn't come, but it did. And before we proceed, I want to turn it over to our town manager, Mr. Kimball. I know he has some words and comments about Jerry's stellar career here, and then I'll take over from there. Sean?
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I appreciate the opportunity. And I think, Jerry is really in so many ways one of a kind. He has been so identified with the town of Cheshire and with this role that he's served. And I think for folks that may not be aware, the Economic Development Coordinator position is really also kind of a jack of all trades. Jerry has a background that has allowed him to help take over individual projects, the 325th celebration, any number of special events and things behind the scenes often here for the town. He doesn't love the limelight, but he gets an incredible amount of work done behind the scenes. And he's really shaped the town of Cheshire over the last 30 years in so many ways, from, obviously the core responsibilities of recruiting and retaining businesses, the town. But as I said, everything from the Historic District Commission to the Beautification Committee. And as I know the chairman and many others have seen behind the scenes, nudging people in the right places to get the little things around town right. Some of the spots that maybe need a little extra attention, or maybe some businesses that could use a little help sprucing up their appearance. It's really so many things that are all for the betterment of the community. And I think that's, when I think about Jerry, I just think of someone who has had such a passion for this town. And as I said, who has really shaped the way it looks and feels today, and has done an incredible amount of work, again, often behind the scenes to make it happen. So while I only had the pleasure to work with him for the last 3 years, I'm incredibly proud about the economic development accomplishments we've achieved in just this last 3 years. And it's a testament to the hard work of Jerry. So I appreciate the opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kimball. Certainly, we echo those thoughts. I've known Jerry for a number of years. I have the utmost respect for you, Jerry. I think you know that, for many reasons. Not only your work here in Cheshire, but I know you're just a great person. So it's difficult to say goodbye from this perspective, although I'm hoping that it's not really goodbye, that you're going to be around and continue to carry the flag for the community that I know you love so much. You've spent 30 plus years giving back to this community. And as Sean just said, you've been the face of our community in so many different areas, and a lot of areas that people don't know. When there's a little problem, a little blight issue with a business, you're the one to nudge them in the right direction. Nobody even sees that. So that happens. You do that every day. But then there's the big issues of economic development. working along with all of our businesses in our community, helping them to get everything they need, whether it be grand list growth for our community, but certainly making sure we're serving those businesses in a way that's beneficial to them, that helps them thrive and survive in our community. We have been growing Cheshire at a very difficult time. The landscape of competition is very difficult. Connecticut for many years has been a tough place to attract businesses to come to, and we're competing against communities adjacent to us that are very difficult to compete against. You've made that job much easier for us because of your hard work and dedication for many years. I don't know how you've done it in some cases. I just think it's your demeanor. You have a wonderful demeanor about yourself when you interact with somebody. You're very soft-spoken. You're stern in a way, but don't come across that way. You make people feel very comfortable. I remember, one of the first times I've met you, you made me feel unbelievably comfortable right out of the gate. And I think that's one of your best trademarks that I know is that, you make people feel real comfortable. And I think that's important because you're trying to get people to do things that aren't always easy, but it starts with a mutual respect. And you tend to gain that from almost everybody that I know that's interacted with you. So I don't want to be too long-winded, Jerry. I could probably talk about you for hours. I don't want to do that because, as Sean said, I know you're not someone who enjoys the limelight, but I want you to know from me and from the rest of the council and from our entire community that we are sincerely grateful for the amount of time that you've committed to this community. We are far better as a community for your efforts. And we've really ramped up our goals for grand list growth in the last few years because money has been tight. And we have places that we want to strategically invest to make sure our community stays strong and prosperous long into the future. And we can't do it on the backs of our taxpayers. So it's important that we focused on a really good quality grand list growth plan that is not just any grand list, but quality grand list. And so you've helped us accomplish that. We see the fruits of our labor happening. And so you played a huge role in that, Jerry, and I want to thank you personally for those efforts. You're going to be greatly missed. I know we're going to introduce your replacement, who also is, I think, the right person and the right person to hand this over to. So, our comments for Andrew are, please take him in the right stead here, Andrew. We're happy that you're here. I don't want you to think that we're not, because you're going to be a wonderful replacement for Jerry, but we're certainly very sad that we're losing Jerry and his many years of service to this community. So I'd like to open it up to the council to make any comments, and then I have a proclamation, Jerry, which I'll come up to the podium. I'd like to read, and if you don't mind, I'd just love to shake your hand or give you a quick hug if that's even allowable these days. But thank you for your service. So with that, any other members of the council? Mr. Slocum.
If I may. Jerry, it's always been a pleasure working with you. You seem to be a guy who gets really down to the nitty gritty of what's going on in town. I've always thought you respected the wishes of the council and that you understood what direction we were going in. Or if it was a matter of tiff and you had to encourage us to get there, you took good ideas, introduced them to the council, and so that we understood where you were coming from, and you certainly seemed to understand where we were coming from. And I think that was terrific. For that, I thank you. I know you were instrumental in getting 3 beer companies to come to town. I know you like to drink a decent beer. You haven't accepted my offer to join me with one, but you haven't shared your cell phone either. So mine's in the book. I would welcome a call from you as you enter in another phase of your life, which is called retirement. I hope it's blessed with some busyness, but also a lot of lofty ideas about how to relax. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Other members of the council? Ms. Nichols.
Yeah, Jerry, I just have to say, I've worked with you long before I was sitting in this council seat. And as a business owner, always had wonderful interactions with you. And I have to say, I echo Rob's statement about you always made me feel like you had time for me. And when I showed up in your office, either as a business owner or as a council person, it was always, come on in, let me sit down and let me hear what it is that is on your mind. And I think that's really important, is the listening part of it. And you did that very, very well. I also know how thoughtful you were and thankful to people when they needed to be thanked for whatever contribution that they made on a voluntary basis. So I will miss you. I will miss dropping into your office. Andrew, perhaps I will drop into your office, right? And I look forward to that as well. But we'll miss you, Jerry, and I hope I see you in the garden sometime.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. I got to know Jerry when I decided to open a business a couple years ago, not knowing what to do. And Jerry was very welcoming and helping me try to find a location. But besides that, I run a charity in this town, and he's been a huge supporter of that as well and assisting with that. And he's the type of person that this community probably doesn't even know half the stuff he does that makes this community so wonderful. And I know that he's going to be truly missed. And I know that Andrew is going to pick up where he left off. You got big shoes to fill, Andrew, but I know you're capable of doing that as well. But Jerry, I want to thank you for everything you have done for me personally and for our charity and for my business. So I will miss you as well. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Veliber.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jerry, it's always been great. I've known you for many, many years now, and I've always appreciated your hard work. And what's always been great is it's always been sort of a strong, silent presence in the town, always working hard to bring new and good businesses to this town, but also working hard to maintain a business environment for the existing businesses in town and really working hard for them. I know I go to a lot of functions, a lot of things, and every time I go to something, Jerry's always there, whether it's Chamber of Commerce things, different things around town. And it's really shows how much of a dedication he's had to this town. Always being there for businesses, listening to what they have to say. And as Rob and Sylvia said, it's, that's been very important to this town, both for growth, but also just to maintain the general business sense in this town. It's important to have the town showing its business population that it cares about who's here, what's happening here, and creating that environment for businesses to want to be here and to thrive here. So we thank you all for that. And you're always a great guy. Everywhere we go, everyone has only great things to say about Jerry because he truly cares about what's happening. And he's always looking out for the best interests of things. And I want to thank you for your years of work, and as well having the opportunity to work with you as liaison for the Historic District Commission. You've done a great job with that as well, making sure that the Historic District runs and functions properly and well, and it's sort of a well-oiled machine. So you're a jack of all trades in this town, and we're going to miss you. But we know that you've left the town in a better place, and so we thank you for that. And you've left it in a great position for Andrew to pick up and run with. So thank you, Jerry, for all your help.
Thank you, Mr. Veliber. Ms. Pavano.
We will miss you and hope that you'll come back and see us and enjoy your retirement, because you certainly have earned it.
Thank you, Ms. Pavano. Mr. Bowery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jerry, you're a wonderful man. You're a terrific person. You really dedicated so long to the town of Cheshire. You've got the temperament to guide as needed, but also to lead as needed when we're in different aspects of the community that you're involved in. You have the sincerity and the integrity to work on behalf of Cheshire with all the different organizations that you've had to deal with, water company that I would know, and others that you've worked with, builders and developers to come here. They certainly have, they know your integrity, and that certainly has been to our benefit. You've been the silent hand behind so many things, as you're starting to hear now publicly, but we're very glad that you came here. And, we were a little nervous when George Heston retired as our first Economic Development Commissioner, but it certainly was a wonderful find that you came here and spent so much time with the town. Thank you for making it a better place.
Thank you, Mr. Barr. Mr. Talbot.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Jerry, I'm gonna keep my comments short because there's been so many great things said by my colleagues before me. You and I did have an opportunity to speak prior to your retirement day. So, and I was able to tell you the personal things and what you've meant to me personally and how much I appreciate everything that you've done. Like some of my other colleagues, you and I go back prior to my time on the council. And as I think Rob mentioned, the interactions we've had have always been friendly. They've always been professional. And I've really felt like I got to know you over that period of time, even before my time on the council. The job you've done, as my colleagues have noted, has been outstanding. You will truly be missed in this community. We can't thank you enough. You haven't been in the limelight, by some of it by your own choosing, but I think the things that you've done will leave a huge legacy for you in this community for years and years. For Andrew, as my colleagues have said, you've got some big shoes to fill, but we certainly look forward to you putting your own stamp on the department and can't wait to see some of the great things that you're going to do for Cheshire. So thank you both for your roles.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Mr. Jenks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The advantage of going last is I can be extremely brief. First of all, Jerry, I just want to say personally, thank you for the support that you've shown me. I've really enjoyed working with you over the years. I think you know that. And it's rare to find someone that pours so much of themselves into their work. You're the utmost professional, and that's always come across. And I'm sure that's a key ingredient is why you've been so successful in your role and for the town of Cheshire. And I know as we've all said, we're going to miss you greatly. The community's going to miss you greatly. And as everyone else has said, Andrew, you have very big shoes to fill, and I'm sure that you're going to do a great job as well, and look forward to working with you. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Jenks. And Jerry, I'm going to come up to the podium and read a proclamation, which I know you don't really want, but nonetheless, I'm going to do it. Okay. I always have a problem with these. I think Sean does it on purpose to make me look silly. But in any event, Jerry, in all seriousness, this certificate of appreciation to you, Jerry Sicko, our Economic Development Coordinator, dated August 10, 2021. Whereas Jerry Sicko has served the town of Cheshire as Economic Development Coordinator for 30 years, expanding and supporting the Cheshire business community, and is now enjoying a well-earned retirement. And whereas Mr. Sicko was instrumental in guiding the significant economic growth and changes that took place in Cheshire over the past 3 decades, he was also an involved and valuable advocate for the Cheshire community, managing many programs and events behind the scenes, and has become a familiar presence. And whereas in addition to ensuring the town was an active partner with the Cheshire Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Sicko also worked with the volunteers on the Economic Development Commission, the Historic District Commission, the Town Beautification Committee on their successful endeavors. Mr. Sicko also worked with various other town commissions and temporary committees, proving his worth as a utility player. And that he certainly was. Now, therefore, I, Robert J. Orris Jr., Mayor and Chairman of the Town Council, on behalf of the Town Council and all citizens of Cheshire, by the Certificate of Appreciation, acknowledge, Jerry, your achievements and dedication and service to the town of Cheshire, and offer our sincere appreciation for your many years of contributions to this community. We miss you. We wish you much contentment in your retirement, dated this 10th day of August, 2021. Jerry, we've said it all, but you will be greatly missed. And I certainly give you this proclamation. It's not a lot, but I hope you recognize it as our way of saying thank you so much for all of your hard work here in this community.
It's very gratifying. Thank you.
Jerry, thank you so much. What people don't realize is Jerry and I made a pact that we would go out together. So he's retiring from Economic Development Coordinator and I'm retiring from the Town Council. I'm sure they're happy with, the community's probably happy with half of that, Jerry. Okay, Jerry, thank you so much. We're going to move on to item 4C, which is introduction of our new Coordinator of Economic Development and Grant Writing, Andrew Martelli. Andrew, this was a tough act to follow, and I actually asked Sean and Arnett if this was the right time to do it because we didn't want to make you feel uncomfortable at all, or certainly rain on Jerry's parade. But what we quickly heard back from Jerry, which is very typical, number one, he wanted you to be here, and that says a lot about you. You do have big shoes to fill. I don't know you that well. We've gotten to know each other a bit over the last couple of years, but your reputation is that you love this community. And your passion for this community came through in your interviews with Sean and Arnett, and what I know of you. Every time we've had conversations, the thing that comes through most and foremost for me with you is you do love this community, and that's where it starts. I mean, we really want someone who loves this community because then you put their best interests first. I know you're going to do that, and I know you have the professional background to do a great job. So I think this was a huge win for our community, being able to get you into this position. I thank you for considering it. I'm looking forward to working with you, albeit it may be a short period, but nonetheless, even when I'm off the council, I hope that I can be available as someone who runs a business and lives here in this community where I can be a resource, and certainly we can help each other continue to advance things that are good for this community, because I too care about this community like I know you do, and that's how this community has been great for many years. All of us working together for a community we love to put the community first. And none of us have any personal agendas. And I know you're going to do a wonderful job, Andrew. I look forward to that. Again, I probably should have turned it over to Sean because I'm sure he wants to say a few things. He was the one that was most involved in the process to get to you. Seems like it was a really easy decision. So thank you, Andrew, for committing more time to the town of Cheshire. You're already doing it as an elected official on the Board of Ed, but nonetheless, this is another step, and I want to thank you for that. And I look forward to working with you. Sean, I'll turn it over to you and then the rest of my colleagues.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And just to echo some of the statements you said, as you can tell, again, as many have said, it's a tough act to follow in terms of Jerry Sicko. But when we went through the interviews, and I will say there were some very, very strong candidates. So I think that's a testament to just how incredibly perfect I think Andrew is going to be for this role. When we realized in meeting with him and reviewing his background and interviewing that his experience literally checks every box that we were looking for this relatively unique position, as we had said, with a variety of responsibilities. He has a degree in urban and community studies and over 15 years of municipal development experience, including management of some significant economic and community development projects. He has impressive grant writing expertise, something that we've added more formally to this job description with the council's support just this last year. He has extensive knowledge of state and local government, zoning, real estate development, environmental remediation, historic preservation, public speaking and communication, and negotiations. And as if that wasn't enough, he's also from Cheshire. And as Rob just said, he loves this community. It comes through in every conversation you have with him. I think he's going to be an incredible advocate for the town, both going forward and attracting new business. He knows the community very well. He has a deep dedication to this town. As mentioned, he's given back to this town. He serves on the Board of Education. He previously served on the Historic District Commission, which he will now be staff support to. And he's incredibly active in our Cheshire community. So I'm just incredibly excited about having Andrew in this role. It's already been this is his second day on the job, the conclusion of his second day on the job. And I hope it's the first and second of many, many more. So welcome aboard, Andrew.
Thank you, Sean. Colleagues, Mr. Talbot?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Andrew, everybody's going to say you've got some big shoes to fill, and we know you do. I haven't known you for that long either. But the first time I heard you speak, was at a forum. And I specifically reached out to you afterwards to tell you how impressed I was with the way you handled yourself, the way you carried yourself. My respect for you has only grown over the short time that we've known each other. I have no doubt in my mind that you're going to do a fabulous job for this community because, as Rob mentioned, the love you have for this town. So we look forward to this next chapter, and I'm excited about you putting your stamp on economic development in this community and seeing what you can do for the town. So welcome aboard. We're very happy to have you.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Other comments from my colleagues? Mr. Slocum?
Yeah, I'll only share that I've known Gerald, not Gerald, who the hell is he? Andrew. I've known Andrew for a long time, and I can tell you he was a grown-up when he was a kid. And, that's something to say because it's shown in an early part of his life that he was, he had goals, he had objectives, and, older folks kind of look at that and say, that's kind of neat. And turns out one of his goals, I think, was to be involved in a community of some kind. And I'm happy it's this community because I know he's going to be deeply committed. I've been a cheerleader for a long time. Now I'm probably going to take a second look because I think you're probably the first person who's come before us already inflated because suddenly this is going to become real work with expectations, but I know you can deliver. And I'm proud of you, and I'm very happy you applied for the job and got it. And Godspeed.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Yes, Ms. Nichols.
Andrew, I've been delighted to get to know you through our somewhat tumultuous meetings on the School Modernization Committee, and have been very impressed with the way we have all worked together, and that you have addressed issues that have been somewhat contentious on occasion and so on, and been very, very reasonable at your approach. And we've gotten to know each other only slightly, but I'm looking forward to getting to know you better. I'm delighted that you're here with a little bit of a younger perspective than perhaps comes from this seat, but that's stuff that Cheshire needs to keep ourselves modern and in contention with other towns. And so I'm delighted that you're here. I think it's going to be fantastic. And I will try not to bug you as much as I bug Jerry in his office, at least for the first couple of weeks. Welcome. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Ms. Pavano.
You wanted to give back to the community, you wanted to go to education, which I had a great deal of respect for you then. I know what your passion is in Cheshire. And the town is going to be very lucky to have you. I know Jerry, shoes are going to be hard to fill, but I think you're going to do a really great job. We're all very proud of you. We're glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Pavano. Mr. Jenks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I just wanted to say that when I heard, Andrew, that you were going to be the next economic development coordinator, I thought, of course, that makes perfect sense. So I know you're going to do a great job. I wasn't aware of your extensive professional background. I thought just based on what I knew of you and how much you care about the town, I thought you'd do a great job. So knowing a bit more about your background and what you're bringing to the table in terms of grant writing and the position, I have full confidence and really looking forward, like I said earlier, looking forward to working with you and good luck.
Thank you, Mr. Jenks. Mr. Velber.
Thank you. Well, Andrew, I think everyone's saying the same things, but we're all looking forward to working with you. It's been a pleasure getting to know you over the last few years, both within town business and personally. I think it's been a great opportunity to get to know you. And when I heard, the news, I thought that is going to be a perfect fit. So I'm very excited to have the opportunity to work with you and hopefully going forward for many years to come. And welcome. It's going to be busy. It's going to be a lot of fun, but we know that you're going to do a great job. So welcome aboard.
Thank you, Mr. Velber. Mr. Walsh.
Thank you. I got to know Andrew, I think 2 years ago. We were standing out on election day in a cold rain for several hours, and we had a very nice chat talking about the town and what our hopes were for it, not knowing that 2 years later he'd be having such a great position to bring a lot of his ideas and hopefully draw a lot more businesses into this town. And I think it's a perfect fit for this town, for you, and for your skill level that you have. I know that you're going to do a lot of great things for this town. And I appreciate that you decided to take this position, because I think it's important to have somebody with your skill level to help us move forward from where Jerry left us. And I think you'll do great things. So welcome aboard.
Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Yes, Mr. Talbot.
Just briefly, Mr. Chair, the good news is, Andrew, that between your role previously and your current role, at the end of the week, there's a paycheck.
All of us sitting up here are very jealous. There's no other comments or anything from my colleagues. Again, Andrew, congratulations. Welcome aboard. If there is anything that I can do to assist, please do not hesitate to reach out, either in my capacity as council chair for as long as I'm here, or in my capacity as a resident and a business owner. I look forward to working with you in an effort to continue to help this community. So, and with that, if you'd love, Andrew, if you'd like, we'd love to have you come up and just make a brief statement. We know you're good at it, so.
Well, can I take the mask off? So, this is huge for me. This is a dream job. To say it's not a dream job, I'd be lying. So I know you guys know my background a little bit, but for over 11 years, I did this for the city of Waterbury. I was a kid right out of college, internship, got hired, and I worked really hard for that community. And I'm a single dad. I was raising a child at the time. And so it became a little bit too much for me to be in the office every day. And so I was working from home for an environmental remediation company for a few years. And then most recently, I was the senior project manager for NeighborWorks New Horizons, building affordable housing across the state of Connecticut. So I always kind of had my hand in development, both local, municipal, and private. So when this job was advertised, I had said to myself, I had to apply for it. I was working on a grant application at the time with Jerry, actually, because I was on the board of directors for Ball and Socket Arts, which is another, I've been on the board there for 6 years, which I just had to step down from for this position. And I mentioned to Jerry, I said, I'm going to apply for that job. I'm going to apply for your job, I said to him. And he kind of like chuckled with me a little bit. And he said, well, when you get your interview, you call me. So Jerry gave me a couple pointers. It just kind of walked me through different aspects of the job. And when I finally did, after a few months, receive notice that I got the job, I had a call with him on Sunday morning. And he said, this is what he said to me. He said, it was Sunday morning. He had just put down the New York Times. And I let him know, and he congratulated me immensely. And then he said to me, return every phone call, even the hard ones. You're not going to make everyone happy. It's not always going to be a good economic year. You might be judged on grand list growth. So try to do creative ideas, especially in those down years. Engage the public. Always engage the public. Make sure the town council and town manager hear it first before you report it to the Cheshire Herald. Always support the chamber and always try to do your best. So that's kind of my marching orders. I know there's other things facing the community that are a little bit that are very important, especially with TIF. We have a meeting tomorrow on that. I'm trying to bring myself up to speed on that. But with Ball and Socket, I know it's a huge economic driver for the community, and that's really going to be one of our main focuses moving forward. So we actually just got notice today. We have a grant application that was approved to the State Bond Commission. So Cheshire's going to be the applicant. So I started working on that today. So today's only day 2. And so I promise to work my hardest. My door will always be open. Reach out to me. Rob, I really appreciate, I know if you're not going to be here, I will definitely reach out to you moving forward. And I just want to say thank you for the opportunity.
Andrew, thank you.
Thank you.
Very sound advice from a wise man. But as Mr. Talbot said, we are also looking for you to make your mark. And we talked long and hard about this with Sean when we chose him as the town manager. As good of the town manager as Michael Milone was, we wanted to make sure that Sean understood that we wanted him to make his mark. And he is the now town manager, and it's his job to do it as he chooses and as he believes is in the best interest of this community. And I would say the same to you. While we respect Jerry immensely, and he did a wonderful job, as Mr. Talbot said, we want you to put your mark on this position as well. And I know with your experience and your background and what we've learned of you, you're going to do a great job at that. So congratulations. You're welcome. Okay, and with that, we're going to move on to public comment. If there is anyone in the public that would like to address the council on any matter, please come up to the podium, give us your name and address for the record. Anybody? Okay, seeing none. We are going to then move into our items for executive session. I apologize for those that are here. We're going to go into executive session for a period of time to discuss a number of matters. Unfortunately, some of those matters are items that we will be addressing later in our agenda, so it's important that we get to those items. Normally, with people here in the audience, I would try to do executive session at the end in order to be respectful to you all, so you're not sitting here. But unfortunately, as I said, there are some items we need to address before we get to them later on in the agenda. So with that, I'd like to call for a motion to go into executive session to discuss pending litigation, contract negotiations, labor negotiations, and land acquisition, to include our town manager, assistant town manager, our town attorney, Jim Jascott, appraiser Cappy Amodio, our personnel director, Lou Zullo, and George Nowotny, our public works director. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Second, Mr. Bowery. All in favor? Motion passed unanimously. We will go into executive session. Andrew, thank you. Vin, thank you. We're going to be going into our caucus room, so you're able to stay here until we come back. Order, and we're going to move on to our number 5 item, approval of minutes. The regular meeting of July 13, 2021, special meetings of July 28th and 29th, 2021. Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Thank you, Mr. Talbot, for his second. Any questions or comments on the minutes? Seeing none, call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. Going to move on to item 6, consent calendar. Mr. Bowery.
Mr. Chairman, be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 081021-1, the consent calendar for August 10, 2021.
Thank you, Mr. Bowery. You have a second from Mr. Talbot. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Mr. Bowery?
Just a point of clarification, these are generally wonderful gifts that we get from our community, but there are also 2 large grants that we receive continuously year after year. One is for Youth Services Bureau, a main grant, as they call it, but that's to help with the activities, and the other one is a grant for the Services Bureau Enhancement Grant, and that's still allow for, actually I have it backwards, that was correct, it was the first one to allow for counseling services, and an expansion of the counseling services that we offer through Social Services Department, Human Services Department. Very, very good use of getting state funds to help with our services we offer in the community.
Thank you, Mr. Bowery. And obviously, there's certainly increasing demand for these counseling services for both adults and children. So very happy that we continue to pursue these grants. It's money well used in our community. So glad we're doing this. Any questions or comments on the consent calendar? Seeing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passed unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to old business. Item A, discussion and possible approval of town clerk use of special funds. We have 2 resolutions for this. And with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Bowery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 081021-2A. Be it resolved that the town council approves a request from the town clerk to appropriate the following: $8,000 from the community investment fund for sliding shelves, $2,000 from the historic document fund to refurbish and place into use an antique display table previously used by the town and the library, $2,000 from the mortgage electronic registration fund for office supplies and conferences and meetings not covered by the budget, and $18,000 from the MERS fund for the digitization of land records.
Thank you, Mr. Bowery. Do we have a second? Who was that, Mr. Slocum? Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Mr. Bowery?
Mr. Chairman, this is, again, judicious use of funds that we have available that are collected through various almost user fees, if you will, through state mandated funds that are collected, and they do help offset some of our budgetary expenses and help us manage our town and watch the tax dollar.
Thank you, Mr. Bowery. Mr. Kimball, anything you'd like to add? No? Great. Questions, comments from members of the council? Seeing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Back to the second resolution for these items. Mr. Bowery.
Yes, be it resolved that the town council approves resolution 0810-21-2B. Be it resolved that the town council approves a request from the town clerk to appropriate the following: $17,000 from the community investment fund for a temporary staff position.
Thank you, Mr. Bowery. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Bowery.
Yes, this temporary staff position is currently in place in a few hours a week on average to be able to help out, especially at election time where there's more going on there with the absentee ballots and others, but also to help at times in the office with the paperwork and possibly covering for vacations and things like that. So it'll help augment our budget.
Thank you, Mr. Bowery. Any questions or comments from members of the council? Seeing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Opposed? The motion passes. 7 approve, 7 in favor, 2 opposed. The 2 opposed are Mr. Talbot and Mr. Jinks. Okay, we're going to move on to item 9, a new business. Number A, presentation and discussion on the proposed new blight prevention ordinance, a possible call for public hearing. With that, we're going to turn it over to Mr. Veliber, our chair of the ordinance committee. And before he gets started, I want to thank Dave and all of the ordinance members for a lot of work on this. We've been working for some time, or at least they have, on a blight ordinance that they think works well for this community. It's not an easy issue. And I know they've taken the time to kind of get through it to manage something that they think works for the community, but isn't too overreaching. And I think they've done a great job with it. So with that, I'll turn it over to the ordinance chair, Mr. Veliver. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate that thought too. It's first I want to start by thanking the other committee members, Don and Peter. Thank you for your hard work on this, as well as Attorney D'Onofrio. Thank you and your partner Lou for all your work on this as well. I wanted to start with just a little discussion on this, and then obviously if everyone's happy with it, there is a resolution to potentially send this for public hearing. So I want to just say that I'm happy to present our overview of the proposed blight prevention ordinance by way of a little bit of history. This council adopted in 2018 the unsafe premises and property ordinance, which is something that we had wanted to do as a step, and we've continued that ordinance over the years. That was an important tool for the council as well as for the town to assist in addressing some issues, especially unsafe conditions on a property and some social services issues. But unfortunately, although it was a good start, it did lack any real enforcement mechanism or teeth, as you might say, in some of this thing. So following some personal experiences among council members, some of the various properties, as well as many letters and emails from residents who had some concerns about the condition of certain properties, the Ordinance Review Committee has recommended a blight prevention ordinance to try to address concerns regarding conditions of properties that are not being maintained. And so with that, I want to just talk a little bit about the ordinance itself. It was the declaration of purpose says that we're looking to address some blighted conditions because they contribute to the decline of neighborhoods and jeopardize the health, safety, welfare, and/or quality of life of persons within the town of Cheshire. So it's very important that we're trying to work on making sure that we look at those things. It would apply to all residential, non-residential, and undeveloped premises in town. The process would be that the town would have a blight prevention officer who, much like the current unsafe premises and properties enforcement officer, would be charged with investigating and reviewing possible properties that would potentially fall under the course of the ordinance. And so one of the things that we're concerned about really is the state of repair or property that is becoming dilapidated, because the real property, the definition of blighted premises would be real property, including any occupied, vacant, or abandoned buildings or structures located thereon, which is or continues to be in a state of disrepair or is becoming dilapidated as defined below. And in the proposed ordinance, you'll see that there is a list of A through R of items which might be included in that. Many of these things are things that we've seen in properties that we've seen ourselves or that residents have addressed in that, including things like missing, broken, or boarded up windows and doors, damaged or missing siding, collapsing or missing walls, roofing materials or flooring, foundation walls with open cracks and breaks, overhang extensions, which contain rust or other decay, insect screens, which contain tears or ragged edges, other things like infestation by rodents or other pests, excessive amounts of garbage, refuse, or rubbish, multiple inoperative or unregistered motor vehicles, and overgrown brush, grasses, weeds, or other similar vegetation over at least 1 foot. We do exclude certain things in there about ornamental grasses of landscape properties, flowers, fruits, and vegetables. And we did also include an exception or proposed exception for agricultural land, because we know in Cheshire that is important, but there are certain restrictions on that. And so the process would be under this proposed ordinance, if there is either something that the blight enforcement officer or a resident files a question about, it is something that would go to the blight enforcement officer, who would review the property, make a determination as to whether it in fact is potentially a blighted property or not, and provide a notice to the resident of the condition, and giving them an opportunity to remedy that situation. And then if there is, it starts with a warning, a written warning to fix that. If they don't address that issue, then a written warning can be issued, and a notice of violation, if that is not remedied, then potentially the blight prevention officer can issue that notice of violation. And also, any resident who does have a notice of violation has the opportunity to file an appeal with a blight hearing officer. And so that is an opportunity to contest any potential blight issues. And so the hearing would be conducted. And ultimately, if the item is remedied, then that is great. That is ultimately the goal of this ordinance, is to try to remedy situations. It's not there to punish residents. It's there to provide an opportunity to ensure that the condition of properties is ultimately fixed. And one of the things that we as a committee talked about was important, is making sure that there is a special consideration for residents who are disabled, elderly, or low income, who cannot maintain a reasonable level of upkeep at which they reside. Doesn't mean that they don't have to remedy the situation, but it is something that they might, in the discretion of the hearing officer, potentially given more time, not to exceed 6 months, to remedy the situation. And with that, the other concern is, what happens if the person doesn't remedy the situation or doesn't comply with the notice of violation? Ultimately, this matter could become a fine of up to $100 a day, could be levied against the owner. And ultimately, the town can potentially record a lien for the unpaid fine imposed pursuant to the provisions. With that, I'd also like to ask the town attorney if you have any additional thoughts or comments on that. Anything else you think is important for the council to make sure that they are aware of?
Thank you. I think that the council is aware that the ordinance committee held several meetings, and there was a real focus on having a reasonable and balanced approach to blight prevention and blight remediation. As Mr. Veliver indicated, the goal isn't to create some new enforcement mechanism to be used as a weapon against residents. The goal is to provide an ability to remediate blight. And we tried to make the definition of blight as specific as possible, but there are going to be situations that don't fall neatly within the definition. And that's why we have a catch-all. If you look at the definition of state of disrepair or becoming dilapidated, we have a catch-all in subsection R, any other evidence that reasonably demonstrates that a property would cause an unsightly, unsafe, or unsanitary condition or a nuisance to the general public. So the idea is to have a tool, have a mechanism in place to obtain the necessary action, obtain remediation of any blighted conditions. And this ordinance, we think we've written a couple blight ordinances in a couple other towns, and we made this ordinance as streamlined as it could be. We've got a blight hearing officer instead of a blight board of appeals, so that everyone can have an opportunity to be heard and receive due process without unduly delaying or burdening the town through too many administrative steps. So I think it's a fair and balanced ordinance. I think that the members of the ordinance committee did a great job. They asked all the right questions. They really focused on being fair and reasonable to the residents. And another example of that is, instead of going straight to a notice of violation, when there's a complaint and there's an investigation and a determination that a violation exists, the hearing officer sends a warning before the notice of violation is issued. There's also opportunities in the event that someone's disabled, in the event that someone financially doesn't have the ability to act quickly to remediate the condition. There's opportunities to obtain additional time to perform the remediation. And that's a reasonable position for the town to take, because a lot of the times the blight is in fact not contested, but it's a question of having the means to remediate it. So, the blight hearing officer And the blight prevention officer has some discretion to work with residents to allow them additional time if they need it to achieve the remediation.
Thank you very much. And with that, also, I want to give Don, you want to, and Peter a chance to, if they want to.
Yeah, I'll just briefly say that, we weren't going after people for not mowing their lawn every week or, if we don't like the color of their house. This is not what this is all about. This is about true blight. And many people have contacted all of us through emails or verbally to tell us certain areas that they feel is blight. And many times it is. And if it affects their property value, then it's concerning to us. And that's what we really were looking at. The blight officer is going to have a lot of discretion too. I mean, he's going to be able to, this is something we had discussed, that they're going to look at it and say, make the decision whether they feel it falls under the categories that we have stated in this ordinance. And if it does, then he will give them notice. And honestly, I feel that, once they get notice, probably 9 times out of 10, they will take care of it and clean it up. I'm hoping for, and we won't have to worry about it. But if there's that one chance that somebody doesn't want to do it, then it'll go to the hearing, and if need be, it'll go to the finding. But I think this is really giving the bite that we needed in from the unsafe premises ordinance. And I think by moving forward with this blight ordinance is a way to help clean up a lot of areas in this town that need to be cleaned up. So thank you.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, the only other thing I'd add is that Dave, Don, and I have spent what seems like half of our lives on this ordinance. But my other 6 colleagues are really hearing and seeing about this for the first time. So it's something that you guys really need to get comfortable with. But it was more than well vetted throughout our process. Attorney D'Onofrio is the second town attorney that is down this path with us. So, we've been doing this for a while. Unquestionably, there's not a person in this room watching at home or will watch at home. And certainly the 9 of us seated up here that cannot name right now by address a property that falls under this very ordinance. So the pushback we heard was that it didn't, as Dave mentioned, that it didn't have teeth, that we needed something with some substance. We've put together something here, and I look forward to a public hearing and ultimately passing this.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And obviously, any questions council members may have.
Thank you, Mr. Veliver, and thank you to Mr. Talbot and to Mr. Walsh for your hard work. Questions or comments, Mr. Slocum?
Yeah, I had one, and I know it states that the scope of the provisions are for all residential and non-residential and undeveloped premises. I did have one clarification to request, and that has to do with some of the industrial, commercial type of properties, because they by definition can seem probably not so beautiful sometimes. Not that I can cite tens of examples in Cheshire, but how does this impact them? Is there an impact? Are they subject to every single stipulation here?
Yes,
Okay.
commercial industrial property would be subject to the full scope of the blight prevention ordinance. When you look at a building that has multiple missing windows, for example, it may well be that you have a vacant commercial building that has broken windows. That's blight. There's outside storage, for example, that's shown on an approved site plan is not blight. So if there's something by way of commercial activity that's properly permitted, it's not going to be blight. But for example, if you look at in the definition of state of disrepair or becoming dilapidated, if you look at subsection L, commercial parking lots left in a state of disrepair or abandonment, excessive potholes, pavement, cracks, and weeds. I mean, that could be one item that, you get some pushback from a
Yeah.
commercial property owner. They could have, a very significant sum of money required in order to remediate that. So, well, that's why we gave the blight prevention officer some discretion. I mean, obviously, if it's something there's no complaint pending and it's not a public health and safety issue, then, the warning followed by a dialogue about, hey, what's the plan for the parking lot? Are you gonna deal with it? Would be appropriate. But I understand the question, and the intent is that all property types, including commercial and industrial, be subject to the full scope of the ordinance.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Other questions, Mr. Jinks?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And to Dave and Don and Peter, thank you guys very much for putting together what is clearly a very thoughtful and thorough proposed ordinance. Can you you might have gone into it a little earlier. So if an individual or a homeowner is said that their property is blighted, can you take us through the process a little bit as far as how that is then, resolved?
Sure. Do you want to, I mean, because the benefit of having Attorney DeNofrio is that he's had these enforcement proceedings, in other towns that he's represents. So he's had, through many of these municipalities, he's had the opportunity to see not only how these ordinances are drafted but also how they work and how they play out from, practical standpoint and enforcement. So Jeff and his partner were able to sort of put together a practical step-by-step enforcement procedure. So,
Sure. So the first thing that happens, assuming that there's been a complaint or that the blight prevention officer has personally observed what he or she believes to be a blighted condition, is as long as the blighted condition doesn't pose an imminent threat to health or safety, a written warning gets issued. And the warning has to, if you look at paragraph 7 of the ordinance, the warning has to provide the owner or occupant of the premises that are blighted with an adequate description of the blighted condition that needs to be remediated and a date by which the remediation needs to occur. And the warning can't be appealed. Okay. So if cannot be appealed,
Cannot be,
okay. If there's no response to the warning or an inadequate response, then the blight prevention officer issues the notice of violation. And the notice of violation can be appealed. So the idea behind the warning was to provide a less oppressive tool for what may be a relatively minor, not dangerous or terribly blighted condition, but still meets the definition of blight. But if there's an imminent threat to public health or safety, then the blight prevention officer skips the warning and goes directly to the NOV. So the notice of violation is really what triggers the legal obligation of the recipient, whether it be a tenant or a property owner, to comply. And if you look at 7C, that sets forth what the contents of the notice of violation must be. And the recipient of the notice of violation has 10 days to contest the notice of violation to the blight hearing officer. So that due process kicks in with the notice of violation. Because under the warning, if it's not complied with, all that happens is a notice of violation issues. The ability to fine, the ability to bring a superior court injunctive relief action is triggered by the failure to comply with the notice of violation. So if the property owner doesn't comply and doesn't appeal within 10 days, then the blight prevention officer sends a copy of the notice of violation to the blight hearing officer and certifies that no hearing has been requested and the violation has not been remedied within 30 days of the notice of violation, and asks that the blight hearing officer issue a citation. The blight hearing officer then issues the citation, and at that point, the fines begin to accrue. If the property owner doesn't comply following receipt of the citation, at that point, we're going to be notified, my office will be notified that, hey, we issued a warning, no response. We issued a notice of violation, no response. The citation was issued by the blight hearing officer, no response. At that point, we would bring a lawsuit in New Haven Superior Court seeking an injunction, enforcing the ordinance, and ordering and compelling the property owner to remediate. We would, depending upon the nature of the blight, the nature of the violation, ask for authority to go onto the property and remediate the blight if that's what the town wants us to do. For example, if the grass needs to be cut, they may say, hey, we want to go on the property, have Public Works go on the property and cut the grass. And we would then record a lien for any costs incurred by the town in remediating the blight, along with the amount of the daily fines at $100 per day on land records. And that lien is valid just like any other lien that gets recorded. It's unlike tax liens, doesn't enjoy any type of super priority. It's first in time, first in right. Connecticut's a notice recording state. But it's a lien that can be foreclosed, not that the town ever wants to foreclose on anybody's house for any reason, including a blight lien. But that's the mechanism that you have to be reimbursed. I can tell you, in North Haven, it's been about 10 years since the blight ordinance was adopted by the town meeting. We wrote the blight ordinance, and it was really, at the time, there were more concerns with commercial properties than residential properties. The overwhelming majority of people do comply. Those that don't comply, it's usually a disagreement about not the blight, but what the fix is. Or they're planning if it's a home, they're planning a project. This is just part of it. So it's a question of working out some timing. On the commercial side, we have collected, it's probably over $100,000 in fines. And usually what happens is you get a significant blight on a commercial property, and for whatever reason, if it doesn't get remediated, you end up going to court and putting a lien on the property. And then when the mortgage gets refinanced or the property gets sold, they call and they want to negotiate the amount of the fine. But that's the sequence. It's warning, notice of violation, citation, court. We only get to those 4 steps if they don't comply.
And after the notice of violation, the person wants to appeal, they would appeal to who?
The blight hearing officer.
Just to the hearing officer?
Yes.
There wouldn't be a body we'd have to set
No,
up that has.
this ordinance does not establish a body. It's just one person.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney, for all that.
Sure.
I just also wanted to say one more thing about, it is, like I said, it's a very thorough and well thought out ordinance. I've had some people contact me just today about the one particular stipulation having to do with the overgrown brush, overgrown grass, weeds. There's some concern, because some people will now, they're planting gardens for sort of ecological reasons as far as, pollinators, and some people will not necessarily cut their grass so low. They want to sort of have a part of their lawn be longer for ecological reasons. So I just want to make sure we may want to reconsider how that specific piece of this is being written, just to allow for that kind of thing. I mean, obviously blight is something, you kind of know it when you see it. And I don't think that we're at risk of kind of interfering with people's interest in kind of growing their gardens and yards in ways that are ecologically sound or beneficial to the environment. But it does seem like something that we need to sort of make sure we're we're addressing here. And I assume we'll have some opportunity to do that before we
I
finalize
think
this.
in letter M, it kind of addresses that because, and like Attorney DiNapoli said, there is a lot of discretion given to the blight officer. And I think, if they realize this is somebody's garden and it's a pollinator pathway or whatever it is, I don't think that's what we're going after here. And I think, that would be at the discretion of the blight officer. But I don't know if we need to spell that out in there or
Yeah, well, I agree with that. I think that there's definitely some concern about that, but I do think that the language does spell that out. There is discretion in there. There's also a definition, depending on what the nature is, under the agricultural lands in the definitions too, which may or may not, depending on the nature of the concern. I mean, obviously, things like sunflowers, and other, it's covering, ornamental grasses are excluded, flowers, fruits, vegetables, and areas maintained in their original naturally wooded state or a natural field state, provided that the surrounding area on the property is properly maintained and not in a state of disrepair or dilapidated. So it is contemplating that there may be patches of a person's property which is designed specifically for flowers and more of a natural growth, as long as that is, the rest of the property is maintained with that in contemplation. But it's something obviously we can talk about more and as we go forward, if that's something that residents are concerned about.
Thank you, Mr. Jinks. Other questions or comments? Mr. Barwery?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Are people who may be in violation now going to be grandfathered in because this is a new law that they have to comply with?
No, because if it's effective on passage and the blight ordinance exists, then it's blight.
Okay.
In other words, it may not be blight today, but once there's an ordinance regulating blight, if there's a condition that meets the definition, it's blight.
Okay, very good. Just want to make sure there wasn't a way out.
Yeah, exactly.
Nice try.
Thank you, Mr. Barwery. Any other questions? Oh, yes, Ms. Pavano. I'm sorry. Yep.
If I am, as a taxpayer, live in a neighborhood that I have this house that I have to go by every day, and I know that, it's got junk in the yard and so forth, what are the steps that I have to take? Do I contact public works?
Yep.
Do I write a letter to the town council? Do I contact the town manager? What would be the steps that a resident would?
Under the ordinance, it would, either generally, if you're a resident, we will, the steps would be to provide a written notice to the blight enforcement officer. And as a point of clarification, in here, you'll see that there's two roles, the blight enforcement officer and the blight hearing officer. So sometimes there may be some confusion, but the blight enforcement officer is generally a town employee who is appointed under this ordinance by the town manager at his discretion as to who's going to act in that role. And the blight hearing officer is a neutral third party, not a town employee. Generally, it's right now we have a blight hearing officer a hearing officer for other purposes. So that person is the blight hearing officer. But under this provision, if you as a resident have an issue, you would contact the blight enforcement officer, and then that blight enforcement officer would take into consideration and investigate the property and make a determination in his or her opinion, does this property in fact fall under the blight ordinance, and make a determination. And if they feel that it is in their discretion, then they would proceed forward with providing a warning notice to the homeowner of that. So the blight enforcement officer can also do it on their own. If they see something that they think falls into, they can also act on their own. But as a resident, you would contact the blight enforcement officer, and obviously, or probably your town council member who would then contact the blight enforcement officer. But ultimately, it says you're supposed to provide a written notice to the blight enforcement officer of your concern.
Would the blight prevention officer be driving around neighborhoods and looking at commercial properties, even if the property does not signify as being blight,
Absolutely. The blight officer could as I said, on their own, if they see a property that is potentially considered blighted, they can, start their own investigation.
The chief's going to give them a cruiser with a light on it.
Yes. Exactly. So.
You all set, Ms. Pavano? Ms. Nichols?
I have just a clarification about how this notification is made. Is the blight officer coming to my front door, or is he putting a tag on my house or on my mailbox? Is it by registered letter? What's the official way that I have to be sure that I've been notified?
You're going to get a certified letter.
Okay, all right. That's because it's so easy to get away if, well, nobody came or I won't answer the door or whatever.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the blight is going to be exterior.
Right.
So you're going to get a certified letter
Okay.
asking you to remediate. If there's a complaint, and the blight prevention officer is the title under the ordinance. The blight prevention officer gets a complaint and wants to come onto your property, you're going to get notified.
Okay.
But the blight prevention officer under the state statute does have the ability to come onto your property. Can't come inside the house, but can't come onto your property.
Now, if you've received that notice and you have ignored it and you've gotten to the point where you've received a notice saying you're going to court if you don't respond, does your property get tagged so that people going by can see that some action has been instituted or not?
There's no tag, there's no signage.
All right, good. Well,
No.
I wanted to be sure we don't have a big,
No.
whatever on it.
No,
Good.
there's no, we don't
Thank
spray paint the mailbox or anything.
Well,
Themselves.
some things do that. I just wouldn't want them to do that on my front door.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Other questions or comments? I have a couple of thoughts. First is if you have a problem, you want to call someone, call our ordinance chairman, Mr. Gulliver.
Exactly.
I would start there. I would just say this. I clearly support a blight ordinance, and I'm very interested in advancing something sooner than later. I'm very appreciative to the three members of the committee that spent an enormous amount of time on this. I think it was very well thought out, and I think Attorney D'Onofrio added a lot of value since he seems to have a lot of experience here. I'm very glad that Attorney D'Onofrio mentioned that this ordinance is focused on a balanced approach. We clearly don't want to use this as a weapon, as he said, against our taxpayers. This needs to be, in my opinion, for clear and blatant violations, and that's it. We're not looking to infringe on people's personal property rights, in my opinion. We should never be doing that. But there are a number of clear violations that potentially dilute values in neighborhoods. They're completely unsightly, and we've all seen them, and they need to be addressed. It's very unfair for neighbors to have to live next to a property that is very blight ridden. So there's a lot of things that I'm going to like about this blight ordinance. But again, I will be focused on it. As we said, the full town council hasn't seen this to any great degree. I've gone through it once quickly. I'm certainly going to go through it very thoroughly. I have as you probably wouldn't question, I have a lot of questions on it, which I'll certainly get out to the chair of ordinance and some thoughts. One of the things that does bother me is there's a 30-day window to get this work done. And I understand the blight ordinance individual who has oversight has discretion to modify that. But there could be permit requirements in order to rectify some of these, which is referenced in here. We need to guarantee that we're going to issue permits in a timely fashion so people can adhere to the process within which they're being held to, which is a 30-day standard. I also understand in this day and age, not everything can be rectified in 30 days. If you're looking to go out and buy construction materials, siding, or what have you, I'm in the business. I understand you can't get those items very readily these days. So I want to make sure that those that are trying to fix the problem, but for reasons beyond their own control can't, that there's a process within which we're going to work with them in order to do that. So, and there's a whole slew of other things that I have questions on, but this is a dicey issue in my opinion. And this is why I think we failed to develop a plan for many years, because we all recognize the importance of getting it right. So I just want to say to the community, if you think that we're doing this as a weapon, or we're trying to invade your property rights, or we're taking this thing very simply, we're not. It's taken a long time to get to this point, but I think we're at a point where we need to address it. And I'm certainly going to support something. I don't know if this is the exact plan that I'll support, but certainly we'll be supporting something because I think it's desperately needed. We clearly want to get this to a public hearing as soon as we can. I think it's important that when we go to a public hearing, we have the semblance of a document that we all are generally behind. So hopefully we won't take too long to get through this, figure out where we all stand with it so that we can get it to a public hearing, because it's most important that we hear from the public on this. So those that have this document already, please send in your thoughts. Clearly, you're going to have a public hearing opportunity to do it again. And we're interested in moving this forward as soon as we possibly can, but I want to make sure we get it right. So again, thank you to the three members. I know you've worked your butt off on this, and I greatly appreciate it. And Attorney D'Onofrio, thank you, sir, for your hard work as well. So I don't think there's any other action that we need to be taking because we're not going to set a public hearing at this point, and we're certainly not taking any action. So unless there's any other questions or comments.
Mr. Chair,
for Dave?
this is available on the website, correct? So if the town, or is it? Okay, so they could look at it themselves, and if they have any questions, they can let Mr. Veliver know.
In all seriousness, reach out to any of us. I hate the ordinance committee has a lot of stuff on their plate, and Mr. Veliver and Mr. Talbot, Mr. Walsh are working on a lot of items. So, it's great that you send it to them, but feel free to send it out to any of us council members, because at the end of the day, we're all stakeholders in this and need to play a role. So as much as we can tease Mr. Veliver about sending it all to him, send it to any one of us, because that's our job. That's what you elect us for. And if there's no other questions or comments on that, we're going to move on to 9B, which is the discussion and possible approval of a hold harmless and indemnification agreement with the city of Milford for use of a police training facility. Ms. Pavano.
Be it resolved that the town council hereby authorizes the execution of a hold harmless and indemnification agreement by and between the town of Cheshire and the city of Milford for the use of a police training facility. And be it further resolved that the town manager is authorized and directed to execute on behalf of the town said agreement in the form and upon the terms and conditions as presented in this.
Thank you, Ms. Pavano. Do we have a second? Second. Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Ms. Pavano?
Yes, this is the city of Milford hosts a regional policy training facility, which is capable of accommodating live fire training for law enforcement personnel. The Cheshire Wallingford Emergency Response Team has the opportunity to train at the facility, but this agreement is necessary for the CPD personnel to use the facility.
Thank you, Ms. Pavano. And I know we have Chief Dryfair from the CPD. Chief?
You promised me some questions because it's 10 o'clock.
We made you wait all night, so we'll make something up if we have to.
This is, again, it's exactly what it said. The Milford got a grant from the federal government to create this regional training facility. Like everything else, we would do the same if we were hosting it here. They have a hold harmless and indemnification agreement that they require other communities to enter into. Attorney D'Onofrio has reviewed it, made a suggestion for a change, which the town of Milford attorney was more than happy to make. So that change is incorporated in the document that you have in front of you. And it came up kind of last minute. There was an opportunity for the team to train together down there. And, before the end of this month. So that's why I'm here tonight, as opposed to letting it go any longer. So I would certainly appreciate your support for it.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for sitting here all night. Appreciate it. Questions, Mr. Talbot?
I was the one that rose their hand and said, I'll make sure to ask the chief a question.
Excellent.
So is this going to be used by the response team as an entire group?
Yes.
And is it available for individual officers that you wanted to send for some specific training?
Yes to both.
Okay.
Once we enter into the agreement, we'll have the ability to go down there on a more regular basis. It's probably the only facility like this in the state, so it does get a lot of use. And of course, to pull people off the road and get them down to Milford to use the facility can be a little bit of a challenge. But once the agreement's in place, part two of what I have to do internally is now send one of our supervisors down there to become certified by the Milford Academy staff as a range safety officer. But once we have that in place, we'd be able to go down there, whenever it's available, and if we had the staffing available, and use the facility. It's not just a one-time deal for this one training exercise.
Thanks, Chief. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Mr. Slocum.
Chief, currently, what are your operations with the SWAT group? How do they practice now?
Well, they do a lot of what we call simunitions training, which isn't live fire. And by the way, it's live fire, but they're not shooting each other.
Right,
Just
right.
in case there was
Didn't
any
expect
question
that.
there.
I figured that.
But it allows them, it's a much different environment when real bullets are going off. But we do a lot of simunitions training now.
Okay.
But even that, that gets expensive, and simunitions, it's ink. It marks your rounds. So if you miss, it marks whatever it hits. So for example, if we were to do an active shooter exercise here, you might not like the results on the town's finely painted walls and donated artwork. But I've seen everything from sometimes officers go into these type of kind of classroom settings, and they're carrying the blue guns, which are training only, and literally you pull it out and say bang, and that's it's not realistic.
Mhm.
This is a much more realistic training environment, which unfortunately, I think is something that, our officers have to be prepared to deal with.
Right.
And, so I think the level of training and the value that they get out of it will be much, much greater.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Ms. Slocum. Other questions or comments? Chief, or maybe Attorney D'Onofrio, just quickly, clearly this is us indemnifying the town of Milford for our use if something happens due to how we conduct ourselves. But what was important to me, and I'm glad it's clearly in here, is the fact that they have a requirement, the city of Milford, to maintain the facility in the proper working order and adhere to all of these certain requirements. And we are not indemnifying, I guess this is my question point, we are not indemnifying them against the point where they would not maintain it properly, et cetera. I think it said somewhere in here, which I read it, that the using municipalities shall not defend, indemnify, and hold harmless the title owner municipality as a result of negligence or willful or wanton act, error, or omission of the title owner municipality with respect to the maintenance and repair of the facility by the title owner municipality. That's really important to me.
That was my
when I-
change.
That was. Well, you and I are on the exact same
Yeah.
page, because for me, that was a big issue, because God forbid something happens and it's because of maintenance neglect on their part and we're held liable, that would be a problem for me. So I was very happy to see
Yeah,
that.
the original document had their indemnity obligation limited to where they engaged in intentional misconduct. So I wanted to add negligence, and they agreed to that. So.
Well, thank you for that. I picked up on it, and I think it's a very appropriate and good clause for us. So thank you.
Sure.
That's all I got, Chief. It's the best I could come up with. I promised you a question too. That's all I could come
I
up
feel
with.
like I got my money's worth now. Excellent. Thank you.
Okay, seeing no other questions or comments, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passed unanimously. Thanks, Chief, and good
Thank
luck
you.
with the usage.
Thanks.
Okay, we're going to move on to 9C, discussion and possible approval of a one-year extension for technology support with Apex Technology Group. Ms. Nichols.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves Resolution 081021-5. Be it resolved that the Town Council approves a successor contract with Apex Technology for the term from July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2022 for a total of $245,220, with the town responsible for $114,028 and the Cheshire Public Schools responsible for $131,192. All other terms and conditions from the previous contract remain the same.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Ms. Nichols?
Yes, this basically is just an extension of the contract that we currently have with Apex. They are our contractor that helps us with all the technology issues in town. We'd like to extend the contract for another year, same terms, so that we can continue the support and not lose their support for the next year. So it's a pretty simple extension of the contract that is already in place.
Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Questions or comments from members of the council? Mr. Talbot?
Just a brief comment, Mr. Chair, and thank you. I'll absolutely support the extension for 1 year of the Apex contract. They've served as our CTO and took us from a very bad place to a very good place, which is where we are now. They do an outstanding job. They're very responsive, not only to the town, the public school system, but also to the technology study committee. So I will absolutely support this resolution tonight.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Other questions or comments? The only one I have is Board of Ed and Cheshire Public Schools also support this.
That's correct. Yep. Mr. Messiana and I spoke earlier today, and they fully support this extension.
Okay, great. So with that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. We'll move on to 9D, discussion of possible action regarding the appointment of bond counsel. Mr. Slocum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Be it resolved, the town council approves resolution 081021-6. Be it resolved, the town council appoints Judith Blank of Pullman and Cumley as bond counsel for the town of Cheshire pursuant to the terms as presented and discussed.
Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Walsh. Mr. Slocum.
The town employs bond counsel to basically get our referendum stuff correct, to make sure we're dotting all the Ts and that our borrowing is up to speed. They have fees for that service. We left as a planning committee charged with vetting new town attorney applicant. We left this particular role in town manager's hands. We did so because it's a complicated topic that they are more intimate with as it deals with the town's finances. And as a consequence, they've come forward with this application, with this recommendation, and I've advanced the resolution, but I'm going to prevail upon Sean to amplify any comments he'd like to make.
Sure. Thank you. So as Mr. Slocum just indicated, this was part of the combined RFP that we issued last year for attorney services for town attorney, bond counsel, and labor counsel. So this is the bond counsel component. Jim Jascott and Gina DeFilio and myself interviewed all three of the finalists, and I mean, to be clear, including our incumbent firm, Robinson & Cole. In our estimation and our evaluation of the firms, first of all, they could all do the work well, and we also they're all very respected firms, and we certainly appreciate the service that Robinson Cole has offered over the years. But we do feel there were some distinct advantages that Judith and her team brought as she has joined the Pullman Comley firm, and we really we think it's going to be a very good fit. We negotiated the pricing down to a favorable area. That's, again, they're all kind of in the same ballpark, and these are typically paid through bond proceeds when we go to issue. It's typically the way these folks are funded, and but we're really excited. We think this is going to be a really great fit. We wholeheartedly recommend making the change to Judith Blank with Pullman Comley, formerly of Dave Pitney, and they had originally applied as of Dave Pitney, Judith had, and then her bond counsel group moved to Pullman within the last few months. So in some ways, sort of a win-win for us. So I think we're very optimistic. I don't know, unless Jim Jascott had anything else to add, I think that's kind of the summary I would give you.
Second, everything you said.
He seconds everything I said, so.
Very nice.
Yeah,
Thank
that's
you,
right.
Mr. Kimball. Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Questions or comments? Saying, oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Barry.
Just a brief comment under Mr. Slocum's excellent leadership. Mr. Jenks and I reviewed the town attorney information, and you folks had that, but we left this in the hands, as Mr. Slocum said, of staff, because they're the ones that deal with them. And this is very technical. And when we're dealing with large sums of funds that we're looking at potentially dealing with capital budgets that are larger than they have been. They've got good, and she specifically has good experience with regard to school refundings and all that. And I think that's going to be a big help for us.
Thank you, Mr. Bowery. No other questions or comments? Okay, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. I would like to request a motion from the council to add 2 items to our agenda. As you know, in order to do that, I'm going to need a 2/3 approval of this current council to do so. So I would like to request a motion to add 1, the approval of the town hall union contract, and 2, approval of the settlement of the tax appeal for 700 West Johnson Avenue. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Second? Thank you, Mr. Veliver. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you for allowing that. And with that, I'm going to move on to that item, which is approval of the tax appeal for 700 West Johnson Avenue, and turn to Mr. Bowery.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One of a small handful of tax appeals we've had, and the last one now that we will be dealing with. Be resolved that the Cheshire Town Council approves Resolution 081021-7. Be it resolved that the Town Council hereby authorizes the execution of a tax appeal stipulated agreement by and between the Town of Cheshire and Westgate Properties Management for property at 700 West Johnson Avenue. And be it further resolved that the town attorney is authorized and directed to execute on behalf of the town said agreements in the form and upon the terms and conditions as presented this meeting earlier.
Thank you, Mr. Bowery. Do we have a second? Thank you, Mr. Slocum. Mr. Bowery?
Mr. Chairman, as I said earlier, there's been a handful of tax appeals, which with the number of properties we have is quite good to us and quite a credit to our management team and our assessor. But there are occasionally some where there's disagreements in the value of the property. And this one, it would be hard to defend the original value that we put on this property. And therefore, the recommendation from our attorneys and from our expert evaluators is that we accept a lesser evaluation, which would cost us the tune of $36,000 in taxes a year on the property. So I think, well, it's disappointing that we didn't win 100%. We're still at 99.99 something percent agreement with our property valuations.
Thank you, Mr. Bowery. Questions or comments from members of the council? Seeing none. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. I'll now move on to the possible approval of town hall labor contract. Ms. Nichols.
Thank you. It looks like this is the end of the serious things tonight, thankfully. Be it resolved that the town council approves Resolution 081021-8. Be it resolved that the town council approves the contract between the town hall employee union and the town council effective July 1, 2021 through June 30, 2024, as ratified by the town hall union on August 9th, 2021.
Thank you.
Yeah, point of clarification
I
should
do
be
that
July
right?
1, 2020
July 1, 2020, sorry.
to
I
June
apologize.
30th.
I forgot the 0 on my
Right.
thing. Okay, through 2024.
That's right.
So the resolution will reflect the changes that Mr. Kimball just suggested. We have a motion by Ms. Nichols, second by Mr. Talbot. Ms. Nichols, back to you.
Yes, this is one of the last 2 unions to settle this year. And this new contract will provide a wage increase retroactive to January 1, 2021 at 2.3% and a 2% wage increase from July 1, 2021, 22, and 23. There will be a signing bonus, which will address the fact that the contract was not signed at reasonable time. The health premium cost shares will rise from 9 to 13%, and the open access plan will raise from 16 to 20, as happened with all of the other town union contracts, or most of them. So it's all consistent. Each union is consistent. We had some agreements on holidays that are going to be exchanged for other holidays to have days off, and retirement incentives, and the employees will pay for their participation in a long-term disability policy. So this is a very favorable contract. We're very happy to be able to say that it is settled. It's been a long year, and I hope that the council will consider approving this.
Thank you very much, Ms. Nichols. Questions or comments from members of the council? I think it's a very fair agreement. Certainly reflects the times that we live in, so I'm going to support this. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor? Motion passes unanimously. Thank you. With that, we'll move on to item 10, which is the town manager report and communications. Mr. Kimball.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I will be particularly brief tonight because I did cover the first half of this town manager's report under the COVID update, but you will see on the first 2 pages the charts that I referenced at the beginning of the meeting. But moving on to the 3rd page, I want to convey again today, congratulations to Tracy Gonzalez, who earlier this afternoon was promoted to the rank of sergeant. Tracy's worked for the Cheshire Police Department for 10 years, starting as a dispatcher and then as an officer at the beginning about 8 years ago at the end of 2013. Tracy, as the council well knows, is a community first police officer who engages regularly with the public at many local events. She's an excellent member of our incredible police force and a terrific representative for the town of Cheshire. And we congratulate her on her promotion and wish her very well in her new leadership role here. Again, a reminder that the Cheshire Fall Festival is coming up September 10th and September 11th at Bartlam Park. We encourage everyone to come out and enjoy the festivities. There, as in past years, there will be Food Truck Friday, followed by the Festival Day on Saturday with booths from local vendors, organizations, local organizations, car show, musical performances, and of course the fireworks show later that evening. As a reminder too, I hope that folks in attendance will make a point to be there for the 12 o'clock noon recognition of the 20th anniversary of September 11th. There will be a ceremony with bagpipers and a moment of silence scheduled to be held at noon. So an important opportunity for folks to come to, I hope. And more information is available at cheshirefestival.com. The next item is bulky waste and special collection events. As a reminder, the 2021 curbside bulky waste collection is scheduled to begin the week of September 13th. More information, including a full list of acceptable and unacceptable items, is coming in just the next few days. And additionally, the town has scheduled the following special collections for certain items not permitted to be disposed of either in our regular trash or through the bulk waste pickup. So for those household hazardous waste, you can dispose them through the Regional Water Authority. Make sure you register at ourwater.com, and that's available from May 22nd through this summer, through this fall to October 30th. Pre-registration is required. We also will be hosting here at Town Hall an electronics recycling event on October 9th and mattress recycling event on October 16th. And last but not least, we had a very successful first concert from AM Gold, yacht rock fame, as we discussed at our last meeting. Very popular concert. People had a wonderful time there. If you were able to make it yourself, that was last Friday. We have 3 more great Friday lineups coming up, as you'll see here. Heavy Hitters, which is Women of Rock, Capricorn, an Allman Brothers tribute band, and Jason Ingriselli and the Miles North Band, a country band, on August 27th. So we encourage everyone to come out, bring chairs, blankets. There aren't food trucks this year, although I do know I think the ice cream truck was able to stop by on Friday. But pack a picnic and enjoy the show at Bartlam Park. And with that, ends my report.
Questions or comments for Town Manager Kim? Mr. Talbot.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Either to the town manager or the solid waste chair, Mr. Walsh. Bulky waste starting September 13th, and that would be for individuals. That week would be for individuals that have a Monday collection.
Correct. It's going to be regular trash pickup. If you're Monday, you're the first week. Tuesday, you're the second week, so on.
So the 13th would be Monday collection. The 20th would be Tuesday collection. 27th, the 4th, and the 11th of October would be the Monday through Friday weeks.
Correct. And then I guess they will have the last week in case they got backed up a little bit.
Yeah, so the only caveat to that, that's the plan. The only caveat, last collection 2 years ago, you recall, we had kind of an unprecedented amount. And I think each route took more like a week plus a day or two. So things got a little behind. But if folks could plan to have their stuff out that week, that is their week, then it should be picked up within a few days of their collection. So that's the goal.
And check the town website.
Check the town website, and there's a lot more information be coming out. I know Solid Waste met recently to review very carefully all the acceptable and unacceptable items. We met with AJ earlier this morning to walk through the rest of that with him. So we're very close to releasing a lot more information. I know people are asking a lot and getting excited for it. So just about a little over a month away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Other questions or comments on that report? The only thing I have is I would also like to personally congratulate Sergeant Gonzalez on her promotion. I've gotten to know her through her volunteerism here in this community. I know she gives back a lot, and I thank her for that. And she's a wonderful representative of this community. So I just want to personally reach out to her and say congratulations. I'm glad she's here.
And also Police Officer of the Year this year, if everyone remembers from the.
Another kudos,
Yeah.
so well deserved. Congratulations. So with that, we'll move on to reports of committees of the council. Chairman's report, starting on my left. Ms. Pavano? No? Mr.
Nope.
Walsh?
No report.
Developer, you gave plenty tonight.
That's all right. I'll save it for the next meeting.
Ms. Nichols?
Nope.
Mr. Slocum? Mr. Bowery?
Just briefly, tomorrow night, you all know we have a budget committee workshop, a special meeting of the council for all of us to be there, at which tonight or early tomorrow morning, you will receive from the town manager a draft that fulfills our request to him of some recommendations to lower the amount of the capital plan. And it's going to be from 83 million for the 5 years down to 70 million. So it's a nice reduction and along the lines of what we spoke of at our meeting 2 weeks ago. Hopefully we can come to consensus tomorrow so that the bond council or new bond council can get into writing all the documents so that at the chairman's call, we can either meet next week or the week after or before the deadline.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bowery. I do have a couple of referrals. One is the referral of the Hawkers and Peddlers Ordinance to the Ordinance Review Committee for review and recommendation. I really can't stand that name. But it essentially is, I believe, door-to-door solicitation policy. But I guess that name's been around a long time, so we're not able to change it. But I'm sure a lot of people wondering what that was. And also, I have a referral also to the Ordinance Committee to consider the merging of the Public Safety and the Prison Advisory Committees. So once again, Mr. Developer, you and your committee are going to be very busy, but those are committees, particularly the Prison Advisory Committee, that I think has been struggling to gain quorums and to do business. I think there's a lot of commonality between the work that they do. I think they can continue to do great work in a combined effort, and I certainly support it and look forward to hearing what the Ordinance Committee has on that item. So with that, we'll move on to miscellaneous and appointments. Number 12, liaison report, starting on my left. Ms. Pavano? Mr. Walsh?
No report.
Mr. Veliver? Ms. Nichols? Mr. Slocum? Mr. Bowery? Mr. Talbot? Mr. Jenks? And it's my understanding we have no appointments to boards and commissions. Ms. Nichols? Mr. Talbot? Okay. Town Attorney Report and Communications. Attorney D'Onofrio, anything? You've had plenty. Thank you. Council communications, I have nothing to meet. Any council members have anything they'd like to share with the public? Seeing none. With that, the last item is a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Mr. Talbot. Second, Mr. Slocum. All in favor? Motion passed unanimously. Good night, everybody.